You think you know landlord horror stories until your slumlord illegally evicts you with 3 days' notice, keeps your $2,500 deposit, and threatens to have you arrested when you try to retrieve your belongings. But what he didn't know is that I'm a housing inspector who had been documenting his building code violations for months, and I was about to report him to the city in a way that would not only get his entire 24-unit building condemned, but also result in criminal charges for endangering tenants' lives. Hi, everyone. I'm Marcus, and I need to tell you about the most satisfying revenge I've ever gotten against a slumlord who tried to destroy my life with illegal eviction practices. This story takes place in Oakland, California, where I had been living in a rent-controlled apartment for 2 years. I'm a city housing inspector, which means my job involves ensuring that rental properties meet safety and habitability standards. Ironically, this expertise would become crucial when my own landlord tried to legally evict me. My landlord was Vincent Kowalski, a 52-year-old property investor who owned several apartment buildings throughout the East Bay. Vince was everything you'd expect from a stereotypical slumlord, greedy, unethical, and completely indifferent to his tenants' welfare as long as they paid rent on time. I had rented a one-bedroom apartment in Vincent's building on Harrison Street for $1,800 per month, which was actually a good deal for Oakland's inflated rental market. The apartment was decent when I moved in, though there were some minor maintenance issues that Vincent promised to address soon. Those minor issues never got fixed, and over 2 years, they multiplied into major problems that Vincent continued to ignore despite repeated requests from me and other tenants. But Vincent's neglect of basic property maintenance was nothing compared to what he would do when he decided he wanted me out of the building to raise the rent for new tenants. What Vincent didn't realize was that his illegal eviction attempt against a housing inspector would expose years of criminal building code violations and result in a complete destruction of his rental property empire. The maintenance issues began. Within 6 months of moving into Vincent's building, I started noticing maintenance problems that were being ignored despite multiple tenant complaints. The front door security lock was broken, allowing anyone to enter the building. Hallway lighting was frequently out, creating safety hazards. The laundry room had persistent water damage and possible mold growth. Several apartment windows had broken locks, compromising security. The building's fire alarm system seemed to malfunction regularly. Hot water was inconsistent throughout the building. The elevator broke down frequently and stayed out of service for weeks. As a housing inspector, I recognized that many of these issues were building code violations that could result in fines or other enforcement actions against the property owner. But as a tenant, I initially tried to work with Vincent through normal channels to get these problems addressed. Vincent, the hallway lights have been out for 3 weeks. It's a safety issue for tenants walking to their apartments at night. I'll get to it when I have time. These old buildings always have little issues. The front door lock is still broken. Anyone can walk into the building. Marcus, you worry too much. This is a safe neighborhood. The fire alarm went off at 2 a.m. last night for no reason. Other tenants are concerned about the system malfunctioning. Fire alarms are sensitive. It's probably just dust or something. Vincent's dismissive responses to legitimate safety concerns should have been a red flag about his priorities as a property owner. The rent increase scheme. In January of my second year in the apartment, Vincent announced that he was planning major renovations to the building and that several tenants would need to relocate temporarily. Marcus, I'm going to be doing some upgrades to the building over the next few months. Some units will need to be vacant during construction. What kind of upgrades? And will this affect my lease? Just some cosmetic improvements and system updates. Don't worry about your lease. Everything will be handled properly. Vincent's vague explanation seemed reasonable, and I assumed he was finally addressing some of the maintenance issues that had been ignored for months. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing that Vincent was approaching different tenants with various reasons why they needed to move out. He told Mrs. Chun that her apartment needed emergency repairs that would take months. He told the Johnson family that noise from their children was disturbing other tenants. He told Mr. Rodriguez that his cooking smells were causing complaints. He told the college students in 3B that their lifestyle wasn't appropriate for the building. I realized that Vincent wasn't planning renovations. He was trying to clear out rent-controlled tenants. so he could raise rents to market rate for new tenants. In Oakland's rent control system, landlords can only raise rents by small annual amounts for existing tenants, but they can charge market rates to new tenants. Getting rid of long-term tenants and bringing in new ones at higher rents is a common and often illegal practice among unscrupulous landlords. The illegal eviction notice. In March, Vincent made his move against me. I came home from work to find an eviction notice taped to my door. The notice claimed that I was being evicted for violating lease terms and had 3 days to vacate the premises. The notice listed several alleged violations: excessive noise complaints from neighbors, unauthorized modifications to the apartment, interfering with other tenants' peaceful enjoyment, failure to maintain apartment in clean condition. Every single allegation was completely false. I'm a quiet tenant who works regular hours. I had made no modifications to the apartment. I had never had conflicts with neighbors, and I keep my apartment meticulously clean. But more importantly, the eviction notice was legally invalid in multiple ways. Vincent had not followed proper legal procedures for eviction. The allegations were unsubstantiated and appeared to be fabricated. 3 days' notice was insufficient under California tenant protection laws. Vincent had not provided required documentation or given me opportunity to cure alleged violations. As a housing inspector familiar with tenant rights, I immediately recognized that Vincent was attempting an illegal eviction to get me out of my rent-controlled apartment. The confrontation. I immediately called Vincent to discuss the eviction notice. Vincent, I received your eviction notice, but all of the allegations are false. I've never received any noise complaints, and I haven't violated any lease terms. Marcus, I've received multiple complaints about you from other tenants. This eviction is necessary to maintain harmony in the building. Can you provide documentation of these complaints? Under state law, I have a right to see any complaints filed against me. I don't need to provide you with anything. The notice speaks for itself. Vincent, this eviction notice doesn't comply with legal requirements. You can't evict a tenant with 3 days' notice based on unsubstantiated allegations. Marcus, I'm the landlord and I make the decisions about who lives in my building. You have 3 days to get out. I'm not moving out based on an illegal eviction notice. If you want to evict me, you'll need to follow proper legal procedures. If you're not out in 3 days, I'll have a sheriff remove you and your belongings. Vincent hung up on me, but his threat to have me physically removed made it clear that he was planning to escalate his illegal eviction tactics. That evening, I decided to use my professional expertise to investigate Vincent's property management practices and building code compliance. As a housing inspector, I had access to city databases and records that would show the history of code violations, complaints, and enforcement actions for Vincent properties. What I found was shocking even by Slumlord standards. Vincent's building at 1247 Harrison Street had 47 open code violations dating back 3 years, including safety violations, faulty electrical wiring in multiple units, fire hazard, broken fire escape ladders on 3 floors, non-functional smoke detectors in common areas, blocked emergency exits, inadequate lighting in stairwells, health violations, mold growth in basement and multiple apartments, pest infestations throughout the building, leaking pipes causing water damage, inadequate ventilation in bathrooms and kitchens, possible asbestos exposure in older units, structural violations, foundation settling causing cracks in walls, roof leaks affecting multiple apartments, windows that don't close properly, security and weatherproofing issues, deteriorating exterior that pose falling hazard to pedestrians. But the most serious discovery was that Vincent had been receiving violation notices for 3 years and had ignored all of them. The city had sent him dozens of correction orders, fines, and legal notices, but Vincent had apparently decided it was cheaper to ignore the violations than to fix them. Some of the violations were so serious that they posed immediate threats to tenant safety, yet Vincent had continued collecting rent while knowingly endangering his tenants' lives. The building inspection. Using my professional credentials, I conducted a comprehensive inspection of the building to document current conditions and verify the extent of code violations. What I found was even worse than the official records indicated. In addition to the 47 open violations, I identified dozens of additional code violations that had never been reported. Gas leaks near water heaters, explosion hazard. Exposed electrical wiring in basement, electrocution hazard. Structural damage that could lead to partial building collapse. Toxic mold growth that exceeded safe exposure levels. Lead paint in units with children, neurological hazard. Asbestos insulation that was deteriorating, lung disease hazard. This wasn't just neglect. This was criminal endangerment of tenants' lives. Vincent was collecting approximately $35,000 per month in rent from 24 apartments, while knowingly exposing tenants to serious health and safety hazards. I took detailed photographs, collected samples for laboratory analysis, and prepared a comprehensive report documenting every violation. The strategic response. At this point, I had two options: fight the illegal eviction through tenant rights organizations, or use my professional authority to expose Vincent's criminal negligence and force immediate action to protect all tenants in the building. I decided to do both. I contacted a tenant rights attorney to challenge the illegal eviction and protect my right to remain in the apartment. But I also decided to use my position as a housing inspector to trigger immediate enforcement action that would force Vincent to address years of neglected safety hazards. My plan was to make Vincent's illegal eviction attempt so expensive and legally problematic that he would regret ever trying to push me out of the building. The official complaint. The next morning, I filed an official complaint with the city's code enforcement department, requesting immediate inspection and emergency enforcement action at Vincent's building. As a housing inspector myself, my complaint carried significant weight with the enforcement team. We have a property at 1247 Harrison Street with numerous serious code violations that pose immediate threats to tenant safety. I reported. The property owner has been ignoring correction orders for years, and tenants are being exposed to dangerous conditions, including gas leaks, electrical hazards, structural damage, and toxic mold. I provided my detailed inspection report, photographs, and laboratory analysis results showing the extent of code violations. This building needs immediate emergency inspection and enforcement action to protect tenant safety. I concluded. Within 24 hours, a team of city inspectors was at Vincent's building conducting a comprehensive safety inspection. The emergency inspection results. The city's emergency inspection confirmed everything I had documented and discovered additional violations I had missed. The inspection team's report was devastating for Vincent. Immediate evacuation order for 3 apartments with gas leaks. Emergency repair orders for electrical and structural hazards. Health department referral for toxic mold and asbestos exposure. Fire department violations for blocked exits and faulty alarm systems. Building department violations for structural integrity issues. But the most serious finding was that Vincent had been knowingly renting apartments with conditions that violated habitability standards under California law. The city determined that Vincent had been collecting rent for apartments that were legally uninhabitable, which constituted fraud under state housing laws. The criminal referral. Based on the severity and duration of the code violations, the city's code enforcement department referred Vincent's case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. The charges being considered included criminal endangerment of tenants, fraud for collecting rent on uninhabitable units, violation of public safety laws, conspiracy to commit housing fraud. The criminal investigation would examine whether Vincent had systematically ignored life-threatening safety hazards while continuing to profit from rental income. If convicted, Vincent faced potential prison time and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and restitution. 2 weeks after the emergency inspection, the city issued a formal condemnation order for Vincent's entire building. The order stated that the building was unfit for human habitation due to numerous serious health and safety violations, and gave Vincent 30 days to either complete all necessary repairs to bring the building up to code, estimated cost, $400,000, vacate all tenants, and surrender the building for demolition. The condemnation order also prohibited Vincent from collecting any rent from tenants until all violations were corrected. Vincent's 24-unit building, which had been generating $35,000 per month in rental income, was now costing him money while providing no income. The tenant relocation crisis. The building condemnation created a crisis for the 24 tenant families who now had to find new housing in Oakland's expensive rental market. But California law requires landlords to pay relocation assistance to tenants who are displaced due to code violations, especially when those violations result from landlord negligence. Each tenant was entitled to relocation payments of $3,000 to $5,000, depending on their apartment size and length of tenancy. Vincent was suddenly facing over $100,000 in mandatory relocation payments to displaced tenants, in addition to the $400,000 in required building repairs. But many tenants also filed lawsuits against Vincent for damages related to health problems caused by exposure to mold, asbestos, and other hazardous conditions. The potential liability for tenant health damages could reach into the millions of dollars. The financial destruction. Vincent's building condemnation triggered a cascade of financial problems that destroyed his entire property investment business. Immediate costs: $400,000 in required building repairs, $100,000 plus in tenant relocation payments, $50,000 plus in city fines and penalties, $75,000 plus in legal fees for criminal defense. Ongoing costs: lost rental income of $35,000 per month during repairs, increased insurance premiums due to safety violations, property tax assessments on uninhabitable building, utility costs for empty building, future liability, tenant lawsuits for health damages, potentially $1 to $2 million, criminal fines if convicted, potentially $500,000 plus, civil penalties for housing fraud, potentially $300,000 plus. Vincent's net worth was estimated at $2.3 million, mostly tied up in his rental properties. The cost of the building condemnation and related legal issues exceeded his total assets. Vincent was facing personal bankruptcy and the loss of his entire real estate investment portfolio. The criminal trial. Vincent was ultimately charged with 15 felony counts related to criminal endangerment of tenants and housing fraud. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. 3 years of documented code violations that Vincent had ignored. Evidence that Vincent knew about life-threatening safety hazards. Proof that Vincent continued collecting rent from legally uninhabitable apartments. Testimony from tenants about health problems caused by building conditions. Vincent's defense attorney tried to argue that Vincent was overwhelmed by the complexity of building codes and didn't understand the seriousness of the violations. But the prosecution showed that Vincent had received dozens of official notices explaining the violations and their potential consequences. The defendant received 47 separate violation notices over 3 years, the prosecutor argued. He chose to ignore these warnings because fixing the problems would have cost money. He prioritized profit over tenant safety, and his tenants paid the price with their health. Vincent was convicted on 12 of the 15 charges and sentenced to 3 years in state prison, plus 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay $800,000 in restitution to tenants and the city. While Vincent's criminal case was proceeding, multiple civil lawsuits were filed by tenants seeking damages for health problems and living condition issues. I joined a class action lawsuit representing all 24 tenant households against Vincent and his property management company. The lawsuit alleged breach of warranty of habitability, negligent maintenance of rental property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud for collecting rent on uninhabitable units, violation of tenant rights under California law. The evidence for the civil case was the same documentation that had led to Vincent's criminal conviction. 3 years of ignored code violations, health hazards that caused medical problems for tenants, Vincent's knowledge of dangerous conditions, his deliberate decision to prioritize profit over safety. The civil case settled for $2.1 million to be divided among the 24 tenant households. My share of the settlement was $185,000, which more than compensated for the stress and inconvenience of Vincent's illegal eviction attempt. The property forfeiture. Vincent's criminal conviction also triggered civil asset forfeiture proceedings against his rental properties. Under California law, properties used in the commission of crimes can be seized by the government, especially when those crimes involve ongoing harm to the public. The district attorney's office argued that Vincent's building had been used as an instrument of crime, specifically to commit housing fraud and endanger tenant safety. Vincent was forced to forfeit ownership of the Harrison Street building to the city as part of his criminal sentence. The city sold the building to a legitimate property developer who invested over $600,000 to bring it up to current safety and habitability standards. The building was eventually converted into affordable housing units managed by a nonprofit organization, the Industry Impact. Vincent's case became a landmark prosecution that changed how housing code enforcement is handled in Oakland and throughout California. The case demonstrated that slumlords who knowingly endanger tenants can face serious criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Other housing inspectors began using Vincent's case as a model for pursuing criminal prosecution against landlords who ignore life-threatening safety violations. The Vincent Kowalski case shows that we don't have to treat housing code violations as just administrative issues. Housing advocates argued. When landlords knowingly endanger tenants' lives, that's criminal behavior that deserves criminal penalties. Several other cities adopted Oakland's aggressive enforcement model, leading to criminal charges against additional slumlords throughout the state. The personal vindication. The most satisfying aspect of Vincent's destruction was how completely his illegal eviction attempt had backfired. Vincent had tried to push me out of a rent-controlled apartment with 3 days' notice based on fabricated allegations. Instead of meekly accepting his illegal eviction, I had used my professional expertise to expose his criminal negligence and destroy his entire business. Vincent lost his $2.3 million property investment portfolio, his freedom, 3 years in prison, his reputation, permanent criminal record, his future earning potential. No legitimate business would hire him. Meanwhile, I received $185,000 in lawsuit settlement money, recognition from housing advocates for protecting tenant rights, career advancement due to my high-profile case, the satisfaction of protecting other tenants from Vincent's dangerous properties. Vincent's attempt to steal my housing security had resulted in the complete destruction of his own life and business. 5 years later, Vincent's former building on Harrison Street is a model of safe, affordable housing managed by a nonprofit organization. The building now has all safety systems working properly and regularly maintained. No open code violations or safety hazards. Affordable rents for working families. Responsive property management that addresses maintenance issues promptly. Vincent served his full 3-year prison sentence and was released last year. He now works at a furniture store and lives in a small apartment, paying rent to a landlord instead of collecting it from tenants. His criminal record makes it impossible for him to get property management licenses or obtain financing for real estate investments. Several of Vincent's former tenants, including me, have become housing advocates working to prevent other families from experiencing the dangerous living conditions that Vincent created. I was promoted to senior housing inspector and now specialize in investigating cases involving landlord fraud and criminal negligence. The lessons learned. The most important lesson from this experience is that illegal evictions often reveal much larger patterns of landlord misconduct. Vincent didn't try to evict me because I was a bad tenant. He tried to evict me because he wanted to raise my rent illegally, and he was willing to use fraudulent allegations to accomplish his goal. But his illegal eviction attempt prompted me to investigate his overall property management practices, which revealed years of criminal endangerment of tenant safety. If I had simply accepted Vincent's eviction, or focused only on challenging it through tenant rights channels, Vincent would have continued endangering other tenants indefinitely. I also learned that having professional expertise relevant to your situation can provide powerful tools for fighting back against people who try to victimize you. My knowledge of housing codes and enforcement procedures allowed me to document Vincent's violations and trigger criminal prosecution that would have been impossible for a typical tenant to pursue. Final thoughts. People sometimes ask me if I feel bad about destroying Vincent's life and business so completely in response to his illegal eviction attempt. The answer is that Vincent destroyed his own life through years of criminal negligence that endangered his tenants' safety. I simply documented his crimes and made sure he faced appropriate consequences for his actions. Vincent had 47 open code violations that he had been ignoring for 3 years. Some of those violations posed immediate threats to tenant lives: gas leaks, electrical hazards, structural damage, toxic mold exposure. Vincent chose to prioritize profit over safety, collecting $35,000 per month in rent while knowingly exposing families to dangerous living conditions. His illegal eviction attempt against me was just a final example of his disregard for tenant rights and safety. The criminal charges, building condemnation, and civil lawsuits that followed were the natural consequences of Vincent's own illegal behavior. If you're dealing with landlord harassment, illegal evictions, or unsafe living conditions, document everything and know your rights. Many cities have tenant protection laws and code enforcement mechanisms that can provide powerful tools for holding bad landlords accountable. Sometimes the most effective way to fight back against people who try to victimize you is to expose the full scope of their misconduct and make sure they face consequences for all of their illegal behavior, not just what they did to you personally. Vincent thought he could bully me into accepting an illegal eviction because he assumed I was just another powerless tenant. He learned the hard way that trying to illegally evict a housing inspector can result in consequences far beyond losing one tenant's rent. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply making sure that criminals face the full legal consequences of their actions. And sometimes the most effective justice is using your professional skills and expertise to protect not just yourself, but all the other victims of someone's illegal behavior. Update. I recently learned that Vincent attempted to apply for property management jobs using fake references and a false name, but potential employers discovered his criminal record during background checks. He apparently still believes that his legal problems were caused by me being vindictive rather than by his own years of criminal negligence. Some people never learn that their problems are the result of their own actions. Have you ever dealt with landlord harassment or illegal eviction attempts? How do you protect yourself from unscrupulous property owners who try to violate tenant rights? I'd love to hear your experiences and advice in the comments.